Rams house. Welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report presented by PrizePicks. Today, guys, we are going through my final Rams draft board at the 13th overall pick. We're going to go through my top 10 targets for this team at 13th overall, or I guess some of these guys you might have to trade up for, I will say. And we'll talk about those two guys off the top. But before we get into the list, two things. First, there are no edges on this list. They will not be available, in my opinion. Arvell Reese, no Ruben Bain, no David Bailey. I do think those guys would be near the top of the Rams draft board if they were available, but I just don't think it's likely that they would trade up for them, nor is it likely that they'll be there. I think those guys are going in the top 4. So I left them off of this list so we could just consider the players I consider to be realistic options, even if they are trade-up options, which will be the first two guys. But one more thing before we get into it. I need some help from you guys. We are so close to 7,000 subscribers. 19 subs away, which I just got to say, unbelievable stuff. We started this channel on January 6th. It was one of a couple new channels that got going, and we have really taken off. I've been blown away by your guys' support. And if we could hit 7K before the draft, that would be absolutely awesome. It would continue to send the message, which I know we've been sending over and over again to the bosses, to everybody here at Chat Sports, that the Rams are an active fan base, that this channel needs more support than it's already getting, which it's getting a nice bit of support. We've been getting a dedicated producer lately. This is just evidence of how much this channel is growing and how the bosses are recognizing it. So we need to keep up that growth. Getting to 7K is the next step on that journey. So help us out today. If you're not already subscribed, hit that sub button for me. And let's jump right into the list. Without further ado, my first two candidates, and I'm going to reveal them together here, Jeremiyah Love and Carnell Tate. I think these two guys are going to top the Rams draft board at 13. And yes, I know there is little to no chance that they are actually there at 13. But these are the two guys that if the Rams are going to trade up, and I've said this a lot over and over again, if the Rams are going to make a move up the board, it is for one of these two players. Jeremiyah Love, because I truly think, and I do not say this lightly, as someone who grew up with Todd Gurley, as someone who was 14 years old when Todd Gurley was drafted to the Rams, I don't make this comp lightly. Jeremiyah Love could be the next Todd Gurley. He absolutely could be in this system. I think he is unbelievable. I think he might be the most talented player in this entire draft. He is Dane Brugler's #1 ranked running back in the 2026 draft. Dane praised him, and everybody praises him. Anyone who watches him would praise him for it. The explosiveness is unbelievable with this dude. He is like the best make you miss in a phone booth back I have watched in a long time. His spin moves, his juke moves, his ability to just constantly flow around defenders, flow through defenders. He is just so hard to take down. You're rarely ever going to see him go down to just one guy. He's an incredible receiving threat as well. The really only area of criticism for him, and you got to search for it, is he needs to improve his blitz recognition as a pass protector. But he would be an unbelievable addition. And we're going to talk about the next guy who would also be an unbelievable addition to this Rams team in just 1 minute. But before we do, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and that is PrizePicks. Guys, if you love daily fantasy sports or you just want to make watching sports even more exciting, you've got to try PrizePicks, America's #1 sports picks app. It's a great time to get started on PrizePicks too. With playoff basketball in full swing and the baseball season underway as well, there's no better place to cash in on all that action than PrizePicks. It's super easy to play. You just pick 2 to 6 players and you select more or less on stat projections, including points, rebounds, assists, three-pointers, and others across all sports. If you're more of a baseball guy, you can choose from hits, home runs, and strikeouts. PrizePicks also has awesome social features that allow you to easily tail or fade your friends or your favorite creators, including me and producer Mike. I'm Jackson Durham with no spaces, and you could drop a follow and see all my lineups, including this one for the playoff basketball action coming up. We've got the more on Jason Tatum's points. We're going with the less on Victor Wembanyama's points, and we're going with the more on Kevin Durant's points. So you guys can tell me on this lineup. You can fade me on this lineup. Whatever you do, just do it at PrizePicks. And if you are a new user for PrizePicks, when you download the PrizePicks app today, use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and in the description. So here's what we got to talk about now with the situation of drafting Jeremiyah Love. If you are going to do it, you would have to do something. While this would make me very happy, drafting Jeremiyah Love, what likely comes next would make me very sad, and that is moving Kyren Williams. If you did it, I do think that the Rams would want to trade Kyren in this situation because I think teams would be calling, and I think the offer would be too much. Obviously, you could hold on to him. You could run a 3-back system with Jeremiyah Love as the lead back, most likely, with Kyren getting some work, with Blake Corum likely being reduced to little to no work, and with Jarquez Hunter I don't even know what you do with Jarquez Hunter in that situation. He's definitely not seeing the field. But if you did want to move Kyren Williams, I think you could get a really strong offer for him. And again, I don't like the idea of trading Kyren. I don't do this lightly. I went around the office today, and I asked some guys, what would you give up for Kyren Williams? And I heard from our Denver Broncos host, shout out to Trace Moustakis, Moose, he said he would give up a 3rd-round pick for Kyren Williams. That's hard to turn down. A 3rd-round pick in next year's draft, a draft we don't have a 3rd-rounder in because of the Trent McDuffie trade, that would be a really tough trade to turn down for me. And if you drafted Jeremiyah Love, I do think you'd probably say goodbye to Kyren Williams. This would also save the Rams $11 million in cap space. Something else to note, maybe that money goes to Matthew Stafford on a pay raise. But let's talk about somebody else and move on from trading Kyren Williams. Because I think a lot of us, we really love Kyren, and he's a great player. So let's talk about somebody that if we drafted him, we could hold on to Kyren Williams. We could keep the core, as it were. Carnell Tate. Because I think Carnell Tate, and I've said this before a lot about him, he's my number 1 receiver for the Rams. I think he's a lot of people's number 1 receivers in this entire draft. I know Jordyn Tyson starting to rise on some people's boards. You notice that didn't really happen for me in this video as we continue through it. Slight spoiler alert. But Carnell Tate has remained number 1 because I feel like he could replace Davante Adams so seamlessly. He has such great height and length, ideal height and length for a receiver in the NFL, in the modern era of the NFL. Unbelievable hands. Best hands in the class, in my opinion. And his routes, he may not be the best route runner in the class, but he is an excellent one. He sets up DBs, really understands leverage and how to create separation for himself without having great speed or explosiveness. He's not an unbelievable blow-you-away athlete. We're going to talk about somebody else who's also in that category. I think it could look to add some muscle to the frame at the end of the day. I'm not looking for him to bulk up too much because I think he'll continue to lose speed at that point, but I do think he can get a little stronger. It'll help him with those 50-50 balls, continue to be that dominant contested catch guy that he's been at the college level against some of these stronger NFL corners. But again, you've seen the flashes of greatness are there with Carnell Tate, and the production is not what it is with some of these other guys. I won't run from that. But you got to remember, he's across from Jeremiah Smith, who might go number 1 in next year's draft if some of these quarterbacks don't pan out. You know what I mean? Like, Jeremiah Smith is unbelievable. Carnell Tate was able to get his despite being across from the number 1 receiver in the country last season, who's obviously not available in this year's draft. I know a lot of you guys want him in next year's draft. I do not think that's very realistic for the Rams. I think he's going very, very, very early. But Carnell Tate, there's an absolute chance, whether it's via a trade-up, and we've talked about trade-up options at 6 and 7, which I think you could move up to go get one of these 2 guys that we've just talked about, Jeremiyah Love or Carnell Tate. And again, if you're a fan of Puka Nacua staying in the slot, which I know a lot of you guys are, then you should be a fan of Carnell Tate because it works out best this way. Puka would remain your slot receiver. Carnell Tate would take that outside role across from Davante Adams, and of course Puka would come in 13 personnel looks to play on the outside, just like he did last season, and Carnell Tate would likely be rotational in those situations. But I think what you can immediately see is when you got 3 receivers on the field, you're borderline uncoverable. But I think the same statement applies to our next option, number 3, Makai Lemon, the receiver out of USC. And these 3 guys right here, they are the day one impact makers. The tier gap between these three guys and the rest of everybody that we'll talk about, in my opinion, is huge. It is very, very huge. And you guys know I love Makai. There is nobody on this channel that we have discussed more as far as the draft goes than USC wide receiver Makai Lemon. And a lot of you guys, you make jokes about it, and I don't mind them at all. I think it's pretty funny. I absolutely get it. I think it's funny too, but there's a reason I have this love affair going with Makai Lemon. There's a reason I have been on him for a very long time, because what he could bring to your offense is an elite yards after the catch threat and a presence across from Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams in year one as well, but across from Puka for the long term that is truly elite. And I know he would take Puka's role in the slot. He would move Puka back out to the outside, but I truly feel that's where Puka could be most valuable, and what Makai would be capable of doing over the middle of the field for you in a Sean McVay offense. Oh my God, you should all be drooling right now because it is just too fun to think about. At the end of the day, I really do think what Sean could scheme up for this guy, he's very similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown, another guy I really wanted to see the Rams go out and get. It didn't ultimately happen, and everything's worked out for the best on that front, I think on both sides. But if you could have another chance, a do-over here at getting Amon-Ra St. Brown, Makai Lemon's that guy. You know what I mean? They play so similarly, and it's not just the fact that they're both USC wide receivers who happen to be a little bit shorter, and a little bit more of limited athletes, because that is absolutely true of Makai, and I know that scares some of you guys, but I have said this over and over again. Despite the size, he does not win by being a burner. This does not concern. He's not Tutu Atwell. I know a lot of you guys get Tutu Atwell vibes and Tutu Atwell flashbacks when you watch Makai Lemon tape. You're like, oh no, I don't want another small receiver. I don't want to spend an early round draft pick on a small receiver because that didn't work out then. Very different. The prototype here is actually more similar to Carnell Tate or to Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who wins with his routes and a guy who wins with the ball in his hands. That's what he has over Carnell Tate, because Carnell Tate doesn't offer you much in terms of yards after the catch. He is a go up and get it guy and pretty much come down where he caught it. All right, Makai, completely different story. Of his 1,100 yards last season, 600 plus of them came after the catch. That is ridiculous. That is unbelievable. And hey, quarterback play at USC was solid last season. Not to knock my USC fans out there. I'm not trying to take anything from Jaden Maiava, but Matthew Stafford, big step up over Jaden Maiava last season at USC. I truly think Makai Lemon could be unbelievable in this scheme. And I think he and Carnell Tate are the 1-2 of receivers for the Rams in this draft, and it's a pretty good gap between them and everybody else, in my opinion, at the receiver group. Not to say that the other receivers aren't solid, but I do think those two guys are day one impact makers and have the potential to be elite weapons in the NFL. A little bit tougher to see the vision with some of the other guys. Fourth, we're going to talk about a tight end, Kenyon Sadiq. If you watched our live mock draft for Chat Sports, he was my pick for the Rams in that one after making a pretty unrealistic, I will add, trade for A.J. Brown with our Philadelphia Eagles host. And why we went that direction was primarily because we'd already filled receiver. But if these three guys are all off the board and Kenyon Sadiq is sitting there for you at 13 and you can't get a good trade down offer, be tough to turn him down. He is a generational athlete at this position. And be very careful about my words there. Do not put the quote as Kenyon Sadiq is a generational tight end prospect, because that's not what I'm saying, but he is a generational athlete at this position. You just don't see guys at his size, at his weight, 6'3", 245 pounds, have the metrics and measurables that he does as an athlete. Just a one-of-one guy, a 999 RAS score, or if you're not familiar with that, that's relative athletic score. The production doesn't blow you away. just like we talked about with Carnell Tate. It's for similar reasons. A lot of mouths to feed in that Oregon offense last season with quarterback Dante Moore. And again, in 2024, not overly productive, but we should all be familiar with the reason why. He was behind our boy, Terrence Ferguson, who we drafted with our first pick last year after trading back with the Atlanta Falcons. I think Kenyon Sadiq, with the prototype that he is, with the measurables that he has, and not to mention the chemistry he should already have working with Terrence Ferguson, in 13 personnel sets, imagine having these 3 tight ends on the field, plus Puka and Devontae. Look out, brother. That is just as scary in a lot of ways as Makai Lemon and Carnell Tate being out there for you. That's unbelievably scary, in my opinion. Those 2 guys, especially as they continue to grow, I really think T. Ferg is set for a big step this season. I think Colby Parkinson, who, as great as he's been, came up huge for us in the wild card round this season. I think his time with the Rams is likely coming to a conclusion pretty soon here as they look to move on with Terrence Ferguson being tight end number 1. And if they did draft Kenyon Sadiq, that clock comes a lot shorter. You know what I mean? That clock is going to speed up quickly because they're going to want to get him involved very quickly. I have him listed as tight end 1 here. I don't even know how long that would last before T. Ferg jumps him on that, and then maybe Kenyon Sadiq is jumping him as well as those 2 guys look to get involved very, very heavily this year and into the future. 5th of my top 5, it's Jordyn Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. And anytime you talk about Jordyn Tyson, you got to talk about the injury issues. I won't lie. He would be 3rd on this list if it was not for the injury issues. I would slot him in above Makai Lemon. I would slot him in right after Carnell Tate. He would be 3rd on my board if it was just the tape. That was all we could talk about. If we could just ignore everything that happened pretty much every year of his college career. But we can't. At the end of the day, you can't ignore it. 2022, this is devastating. This is the one that really worries me right here. Torn ACL, MCL, and PCL. And look, I'm not a doctor, but one thing I do know about knee ligament, I know, and Mike Slavin, surprisingly, I'm not a doctor, right? But knee ligament injuries are ones that can be recurring, or maybe chronic might be the right word when you have them. It's just hard for that ligament to fully repair itself. And because it's not fully repaired, it's a little bit easier to tear it than it was before. So having a triple tear there of ligaments in your knee, very concerning, as is a hamstring injury. Having hammy issues in 2025, those can be things that plague a player throughout his career, and he's got 2 of those. The fractured clavicle, that's a little bit more freak. Again, that knocked him out in 2024 for a good, decent period. He's missed time in every season of his career due to injuries. Missed a little bit of time in 2022. It was towards the end of the year that this happened. And then he missed almost all of 2023 because of it as well. So literally every year, there has been an injury-related issue. But literally every year, you see unbelievable performance from this guy. And that is why he is so alluring to NFL teams. And believe me, I get it. I do. I absolutely understand why teams like this guy. He seems like a very, very tough kid coming back from these injuries. And I know toughness has been questioned with him at times, especially as far as it goes going over the middle of the field. But I'm not going to have any toughness questions for someone who tears their ACL, MCL, and PCL, an injury that is unbelievably devastating and requires a ton of rehab, and then gets right back on that football field as soon as they're healthy. No toughness questions for me. He's got great hands, Route tree is really, really nice as well. But the injury red flags are as big as they could possibly be, and you definitely like to see him add strength. And to go back to the injury question, I think of all teams, maybe not of literally every team in the NFL, but the injuries have to matter a little bit more to the Los Angeles Rams, given that your receiver number 1, the guy who you are likely, and I think almost certainly, to make the highest paid receiver in NFL history very soon, he's injury prone. I don't like saying that, but he has not made it through a season outside of his rookie year fully healthy. It's the reality of Puka at this point. When he's on the field, he's unbelievable, but the injuries have been an issue. I don't know if you want to set yourself up for a 1-2 of guys who have really struggled to get through seasons healthy. You combine the two of them, of the last 4 years, they have 7 of 8 completed without, or not completed without an injury. That's not great. You know what I mean? That's like 85% of the seasons not completed without an injury for Tyson and Puka Nacua. And again, they're both really good when they're on the field. Obviously, Puka miles better at this point than Tyson. I do think Tyson could take those steps and become, I don't think he's going to be as good as Puka, but I think he could be a really good receiver at the NFL level. But the injury concerns have to worry you. And if I'm the Rams, I just can't get there. I can't have a 1-2 of guys who are that injury prone. Let's talk about my final 5 targets. I know we've been here for a while, so we're going to wrap through these guys very quickly. 6th for me is Omar Cooper, the wide receiver out of Indiana. He's been rising my board a little bit. One of the only adjustments that we made to my board is moving Omar Cooper up ahead of the next guy on this list. I just think when I watch the tape, it really comes down to his willingness to block. He is exciting with the ball in his hands. I get excited about the things he can do in terms of contested catch situations. He's a little bit smaller, but I do think that alone is going to move him up the Rams draft board, and so that is why it moved him up mine over Casey Concepcion, who in the past had been over him. Unbelievable yak threat, just like we talked about with Makai Lemon. This dude can do a lot of special things for you with the ball in his hands. He also offers you value on special teams. I think both Makai and KC fit that bill, but he is not a blocker, nor is Makai Lemon at the end of the day. Casey, even worse at the end of the day. He's not really a willing blocker. Makai Lemon is a willing blocker, not an able blocker. Casey isn't really willing or able at the end of the day. Moving on from receivers, let's talk Mansoor Delane. Mansoor Delane, excuse me. The corner out of LSU, and I've been really struggling with the pronunciation of his name today, or over the last couple of weeks, but it is Mansoor. I was reminded by one of my coworkers in the past couple of weeks, so my apologies for that. But Mansoor Delane would be an electric addition at corner. I do think, you wonder, like, what is his role day one going to be if you added him to this room? But if he's there for you at 13, he might just be too good to pass on, as would Caleb Downs. These two, you can kind of have them as like 8A and 8B in some ways. Those two guys are unbelievable players. Both of them would be fantastic additions. And then Francis Mauigoa, if you do want to go offensive tackle, this would be my preferred way of doing it. I think he's flexible to guard, but I do think he could absolutely stand at tackle for you. I think he fills a lot of gaps. Something a lot of people have pointed out is there's a lot of free agents pending across this Rams offensive line. I think they're going to clean up those situations with some contract extensions, but not everybody's getting extended. There is going to be replacements needed for somebody. Mauigoa could fill a number of those spots as the Rams get things figured out. He would just kind of be a eraser of issues in that room. But let me know, who's your top Rams draft target at the 13th overall pick? I want to hear from you guys in the comments of today's video. Let me know who you think is or should be the number 1 Rams draft target at 13. Who do you want to see most? And I'll see you guys in the next one. Tomorrow, we're going to have a 7-round mock. It's going to be our final 7-round mock before we get to draft day. Or maybe our second to last 7-round mock. I won't say final just yet. Second to last 7-round mock before we get to draft day coming at you tomorrow. Don't miss it. We'll see you then.